everything's going great for me, but I'm going to tell you a story about somebody who things were not going so great for. This is a story from the Ukraine, and it's a story about a man. His name was Dan, only he was mostly called Unlucky Dan, because whatever he did, it was no more efficacious than pouring water on sand. He never seemed to benefit from any of it. And so one day he was looking for a new job. He was always looking for a new job. And he went to a man who grew wheat. And he said, I'll work for you for an entire year, and at the end of the year, just give me a little piece of land to grow my own wheat. And the man agreed, of course. And Dan worked hard all year, and as the year came to a close, the wheat had grown really well in both his plot of land and his master's. And then there was a terrible storm, and it hailed. And the next morning there wasn't one stalk of wheat standing anywhere in his plot of land or in his master's. And Dan was looking for another job. So he found a man who had horses. And he said, I'll work for you for an entire year. And in return, I just want this wild colt that I'll train. The man agreed, and Dan worked hard all year. And by the end of the year, the wild colt, it was so well trained that it could pull a carriage for royalty. And Dan thought, finally, I'm going to see the results of all of my hard work. And then, a pack of wolves gained entrance to the stable. The next morning, all of the horses, his masters, and his own colt were in shreds. And Dan was looking for a new job. So he found another master, and he said, look, I'll do whatever you ask for an entire year. And what kind of pay would you want? Well, Dan thought maybe he'd been too ambitious. He asked for too much, and then kind of jinxed things. So he looked around, and he said, well, what I want is that big rock over there. It was pretty ordinary looking, and it was too heavy for anybody to take. And so the master, of course, agreed to that. And Dan worked hard all year. And actually, the rock turned out to be more interesting than anybody thought, because some yellow flowers grew on one side, some red flowers on the other side. And that was a pretty cool rock, as rocks go. And then as the year came to a close, there was another storm, and a lightning bolt hit the rock and shattered it to smithereens. Oh my God. And Dan, no way! Another job. Somebody said to him, you should go to the king, because the king is supposed to be the father of us all, and perhaps he can help you. And so Dan said, yeah, I'll do that. So he went to the king, he explained the situation. The king was magnanimous. The king said, of course, I believe in second chances, and I wish to see you be lucky. And so I'm going to get 3 barrels. One barrel will be filled with gold, one will be filled with coal, and one will be filled with sand. And you can choose whichever one you like. And if you choose the one filled with gold, then you'll become the king after me. And if you choose the one filled with coal, then you'll become the royal blacksmith. And if you choose the one filled with sand, then we can only conclude that you are irretrievably unlucky and you'll have to live in the kingdom. So they brought out the 3 barrels, and Dan walked around all of them, and he tapped on all of them, and finally he chose one. And when they opened it up, it was filled with sand. And the king said, I'm so sorry, but really you can't stay here. You bring bad luck to all of us. You got to leave, but I'll give you some armor and a horse and a sword and a scabbard. Good luck. Count said, yeah, I wish. And so he went out, and he and the horse traveled for 3 days. They had nothing to eat. They were so hungry. And finally, in the distance, Dan saw a haystack, and he thought, well, at least my horse will have something to eat. But as he got close to the haystack, suddenly, for no apparent reason, it burst into flames. But he heard a voice coming out of the haystack that said, help, help, save me, save me. He said, I don't know who you are, but I'll save you, so I can't get close to that burning haystack. And the voice said, well, just stick your sword in and pull me out. He said, okay. So he stuck the sword in the haystack, and he pulled out a snake. I told you there was going to be a snake in the story. And the snake said, thanks for saving me. And now I'm going to take you back to my castle. A snake with a castle. Why not? And so he followed the snake's direction, and soon they came to a beautiful castle that was surrounded with a stone wall and an iron gate. And the snake said, wait here, and I'll open the gate for you and the horse. So the snake slithered under the gate, and Dan waited and waited, and finally the gate creaked open, and standing there, well, I said standing there, so that gives you a clue that it wasn't a snake, right? Snakes do not just stand there. there was a very distinguished looking woman, all dressed in regal garb with a crown on her head. She was obviously the queen of that castle. She said, "Come on into the castle and I will have food and drink for you and your horse." Dan was ever so happy about that. So they went into the courtyard. There were two springs there, two wells. And the snake queen, the serpent queen, said, "Okay, here's for your horse." And she dipped a small bowl into one of the wells. She set out the water, and then she scattered a handful of oats. And she said, "Yeah, that should take care of your horse." And Dan thought, but what could he do? And so then she took him into the courtyard, and she said, "And now something for you." And she gave him a small glass of water from one of the wells, and a little square of brown bread, and he thought, But he nibbled on the bread, and he drank the water, and suddenly, inexplicably, he felt really satisfied. And when he looked out into the courtyard, his horse was satisfied too, so it must have been some magic. Well, he stayed there for several days. And then the serpent queen said, "I've got a plan for you. Why don't you ride out to the next kingdom over, and that king, well, if you stop at his inn, you'll probably find out that king is looking to recruit some soldiers because some enemies are going to be attacking. There's going to be a war. And if you join with that king and his army, you might have a chance to marry his daughter. But if you do, don't tell her any of these things that have happened to you for these 7 years." So he rode out, he stopped at the inn, he found out that the king was looking for soldiers, and he rode on to the next castle, neighboring castles. And sure enough, the king was anticipating a fight, a big battle, and said, "Join the army." Dan said, "Sure, no problem." Didn't tell him he was getting extraordinarily unlucky, because of course he expected his luck to change. And so, I have to tell you, that Dan not only had a horse and a sword and armor, but he also had something else that was given to him by the serpent queen, and that was a magic shirt that nobody could harm him as long as he was wearing that. And the sword wasn't an ordinary sword because it could conquer your just saying. So they said, "Okay, so tomorrow we go out with the army." And Dan said, "Look, I got an idea. Why don't you just send me out alone? No army, and we'll see how it goes." He said, "Oh, okay, we'll try." So Dan went out with the army, but he was wearing his magic shirt. He was carrying his magic sword. Of course, he defeated an entire battalion. And when he came back, the king was so pleased. He said, "Hey, why don't you marry my daughter?" And she was quite beautiful, and so Dan agreed specifically. And so they were married. But now, what Dan did not know, and the king himself did not know, was that his daughter was, I think the best word for that would be perfidious. She had betrayed her father and the kingdom. She had fallen in cahoots with the enemy. And so I know. And so one night she said, now the story gets all Samson and Delilah. One night she said to Dan, she said, "You're really strong. You've been leading a lot of these battles, and you've been doing really, really well." He said, "Yes, I have." She said, "So you must have some kind of magic, some kind of, what do you attribute your strength?" And he remembered what the serpent queen had said, but she was rather beguiling, and so he said, like a joke, he said, "Well, okay, I'll tell you, it's my gloves. My gloves. That's what gives me the strength." So of course, when he was asleep, she stole the gloves, and when the enemy soldiers burst into the room, he picked up his sword. He was still wearing his shirt. He slipped in his shirt, I guess. And so he conquered them immediately. The next night, his wife said, so that was kind of an amusing joke, but that wasn't true, was it? So what really is the source of your strength? And he said, "Oh, well, he gave her one answer, so we needed to give another one." He said, "It's my boots. It's my boots." She said, "Oh, your boots." So of course, when he was asleep, she stole the boots, and when the enemy soldiers burst through the door, he picked up his sword and defeated them easily. The next night, she was really not happy. She said, "You have humiliated me. You have lied to me, your wife, and now I really want you to tell me what is the source of your strength. I told her about the shirt and the sword. And she said, really? He said, really? She said, oh, but I'm glad I know. Why don't you go to bed? But actually, you've been fighting a lot. You could probably use a bath. And he said, well, probably. So they went to the bathhouse. He took off his clothes, he left his sword and the shirt outside the bathhouse, and when he was in bathing, she stole them both and replaced them with the sword and the shirt that looked identical, but of course did not have the power. And so that night, when the enemy soldiers burst into the room, Dan slipped on the shirt, picked up the sword, and was killed and chopped into pieces. And they put him in a sack, put it on his horse, and sent the horse out into the world. After several days, Dan, still unlucky as you can see, he ended up back at the castle of the Serpent Queen. Well, she saw the horse, and she thought, oh no, oh no. And then she saw the sack on the horse, and she thought, oh no. Well, she went over, she got the sack, she dumped out the sack, and there were the pieces of Dan. She recognized him immediately. I believe. Maybe some who knows. And she fit the pieces back together and then sprinkled him with the water from those two wells, the water of life and water of evil. And he was back, better than ever. And he told her everything that had happened, and she said, you know, you deserve some justice here. And he said, I'd just like to forget all of that. She said, no, you should pursue this. She said, why don't you go back to the kingdom? He said, really? She said, yeah. Stop at the inn, the same inn, and when you're there, go out to the water trough for the horses, dunk your head in it, and see what happens. It might lead you back to your wife. He thought, and I wanted that water. But he did. He went to the inn. The innkeeper welcomed him, said, you're back. He went out, and he stuck his head in the water trough, and immediately was just, you really have to follow this story. There are so many parts to this story. He was immediately transformed into a horse. A really amazing horse. A really great-looking horse. Yes, I know. Best horse ever. And the innkeeper was thrilled. He said, so I have this guy, but now I've got this horse. This is wrong with anybody. I could get you penny for this horse. So the next day, he took the horse to the market, and everybody was excited about this horse, the most amazing horse in the world. And the king came by. The king said, how much do you want for the horse? He said, 5,000 pieces of gold. The king said, sure, no problem. Pay me the 5,000 pieces of gold. And the king took the horse back to his castle. He was so pleased with the horse, he immediately called his daughter and he said, look at this horse. Is this not the most amazing horse in the whole world? I love it. Don't you love it? The horse, she said, I don't love it. No, I don't love it at all. That horse is going to be the death of me. You've got to kill it. He said, I don't want to kill it. I just paid a whole bunch of money for it. She said, you've got to kill it. He said, but overhearing this conversation was a young peasant girl. And she felt sorry for this really great-looking horse. So she went to the stables that night. She said, they're going to kill you. What can I do? He said, well, you can't prevent me from being killed, but take a drop of my blood and bury it in the garden. She said, okay. So the next morning, sure enough, they killed the horse. She took a drop of blood, put it in the garden. The next day, this amazing tree sprang up. It had gold leaves and silver leaves and jewel-like leaves, and the king saw it and was amazed. He said, oh, this is the most incredible tree I have ever seen. Daughter, come here. Look at this tree. Isn't it incredible? Don't you love it? She said, I don't love it. I hate it. I hate it. You must chop this tree down. He said, no, I don't love it. She said, you must. Promise me you will. He said, oh, all right. That night, the peasant girl went to the tree and said, they're going to chop you down in the morning. Is there anything I can do? And the tree said, yeah, when they chop me down, take a chunk of the wood and throw it in the lake. She said, okay. So the next morning, they chopped the tree down. He took a chunk of wood, threw it in the lake, where it was instantly transformed into the most beautiful drake in the entire world. A drake in a lake. And so the next day, the king was out hunting, and he happened to go by the lake. He saw, you've got this all worked out, I can tell. Yeah. Oh, you do? Oh, okay. Yeah. He saw the drake. He thought, that's an amazing drake. I must have this drake. And I think I could grab it. He went on the very edge of the lake. He reached out his arms. He couldn't grab it. It was too far. He thought, well, I can swim. I'll just go get the drake. So he took off his nice kingly clothes because he didn't want to get those all muddy and wet. And he began to swim in the direction of the drake. The drake turned around and came back and beat the king back to shore the drake hopped onto the shore with his little webbed feet and immediately, poof, transformed back into Dan. Yay! All of the king's clothes there, so he put them on, and by the time the king reached the shore, Dan killed him. And so then Dan went back to the castle where everybody saw, that he was dressed in the king's clothes, and he figured, the king must have decided that this is the one who's going to be king after him. And so they had a grand coronation ceremony, and everything was great. And one of the first things that he said was, there's a peasant girl here. Bring her in. And the peasant girl showed up. She recognized him, even though she had never seen him in that form before. And he said, thank you so much. You have saved my life twice. And she said, it was my pleasure. He said, well, I would like to marry you. And she said, I would like that too. He said, there's just one thing I need to take care of. Because as you remember, he was still married. But no problem, because he had this perfidious wife seized, and she was tied to the tails of 4 horses that were then beaten, and they ran off into the steppes. And that was the end of her. And so Dan and the peasant girl were married. And I don't know if they stopped calling him Luck Dan, and if his luck completely transformed, but I certainly hope so. And I hope that just hearing this inspires you to realize that no matter what happens to you in life, there are always second chances, and you can truly live happily ever after.